For 3,000 years, the blade of pharaohs had never moved. Not once. Not when emperors bled beneath it. Not when armies marched in its name. Not when entire bloodlines were engineered for the sole purpose of lifting it. It remained exactly where it had first appeared, embedded in a pillar of black celestial stone at the heart of the Sanctum of Ascension. The sanctum itself was not built. It was carved. Carved into the side of a mountain so ancient that even the planet's tectonic plates bent around it. Pillars stretched upward like frozen lightning. Stained crystal panels refracted starlight into spectral halos across the chamber floor. Incense drifted through the air in spiraling ribbons. And at the center, the blade. It was enormous. Nearly 3 meters from pommel to tip. Its edge shimmered with faint gravitational distortion, bending light just slightly as if reality hesitated near it. Veins of pale energy pulsed inside the metal like a sleeping heartbeat. The priests did not claim it was forged. They claimed it was born. Crystallized from the core of a collapsed star. A weapon placed by gods as a test. Only divinity could lift it. That was not metaphor. It was doctrine. 27 warlords had tried. 4 crowned emperors. An entire generation of bioenhanced champions grown in sacred vats beneath the sanctum itself. Each had stepped forward in confidence. Each had wrapped their hands around the hilt. Each had failed. The blade did not tremble. It did not resist. It simply did not respond. The high priest Vila stood before it now, tall and draped in ceremonial white and gold. His crest flared faintly beneath the sanctum's refracted light. His staff struck the stone once, echoing through the chamber. Today, he declared, voice resonating through the vaulted mountain hall, another soul stands before judgment. Thousands of pilgrims filled the terraces carved into the walls. Warriors, nobles, foreign dignitaries, even representatives from off-world systems had gathered. Because today's challenger was different. Today, it was a human. A ripple of murmurs moved through the chamber as he stepped forward. He did not wear ceremonial armor. No flowing robes. No augmented exoskeleton. Just a worn utility jacket, dark cargo trousers, and boots scuffed by travel. A faint grease mark still stained one sleeve. He paused halfway up the steps, glancing up at the towering weapon. "That's it?" he asked quietly. The chamber stiffened. Vila's eyes narrowed. "You stand before the blade of pharaohs," the priest replied, voice cooling. "The judgment of stars. The measure of divinity itself." The human leaned slightly to the side, examining the weapon's balance point from a distance. He muttered. "Looks bigger up close." A few pilgrims gasped at the casual tone. Vila raised his staff. "For millennia, this blade has chosen no mortal. It answers only the divine. Those who fail before it reveal their insignificance." The human scratched the back of his neck. "Right. No pressure." A quiet ripple of restrained outrage moved through the priesthood gathered behind Vila. One of them whispered sharply, "He mocks the sanctum." Vila lifted a hand to silence them. "You may approach," he said at last. "And understand this, human, when the blade refuses you, it refuses your entire species." The words hung in the air like a blade themselves. The human stepped fully onto the central platform. The stone beneath his boots hummed faintly as ancient sensors activated. The weapon's inner glow brightened by a fraction. For a moment, just a moment, the gravitational shimmer along the blade's edge pulsed. So faint that most did not notice. But Vila did. His crest flickered uneasily. The human stopped at the base of the black pillar and looked up. Up. And up. He let out a soft breath. "Okay," he said. "Guess we'll see." Silence swallowed the sanctum whole. No coughs. No movement. No breath. 3,000 years of doctrine stood balanced on what happened next. The human rolled his shoulders once. Adjusted his grip. And slowly raised his hand toward the hilt. His fingers closed around the hilt. For a fraction of a second. Nothing happened. The sanctum exhaled as one organism. A low murmur rolled through the terraces. Some pilgrims bowed their heads, already certain of the outcome. A few of the warrior caste allowed themselves faint, satisfied expressions. Vila's voice rang out, smooth and assured. You see? Flesh without divinity is powerless before. The human frowned. Is it stuck? The words echoed wrong in the sacred chamber. Vila's crest flared sharply. The blade does not stick. It judges. The human shifted his grip slightly. The metal felt warm. Not burning. Not resisting. Warm, like an engine idling. Heh, he muttered. Feels like it's anchored. He braced one boot against the black stone pillar. And pulled. At first, there was only a faint vibration. Subtle enough that most assumed it was imagination. Then came the sound. Not metallic. Not mechanical. Stone. A hairline crack shot down the surface of the black pillar from beneath the guard of the blade. A sharp, brittle snap rang out like a rifle report. The sanctum froze. Another crack. Longer this time. The pillar trembled. Dust rained down in thin curtains from the vaulted ceiling. Vila's staff slipped from his grasp and clattered against the stone floor. Impossible, he breathed. The human blinked. Oh! He adjusted his stance slightly, not straining, not roaring, not glowing with divine light. Just repositioning. And then, he lifted. The pillar shattered. Not explosively. Not violently. It simply gave way. Black celestial stone that had endured planetary shifts fractured like brittle glass, collapsing outward in a ring of broken shards. The blade of Pharaohs rose free. One-handed. For the first time in 3,000 years. The gravitational shimmer along its edge flared brilliantly, then folded inward, stabilizing around the human's grip like a sheath of invisible light. The sanctum erupted. Screams. Shouts. Several priests collapsed outright. Warriors dropped to their knees. A few pilgrims began weeping openly. Vila could not move. His eyes were locked on the impossible sight before him. The blade. Vertical. Free of its cradle. Resting casually in the hand of a species their scripture barely acknowledged. The human tilted it experimentally. The weapon hummed, a deep, resonant tone that vibrated through bone and stone alike. Symbols along the flat of the blade flickered alive, ancient glyphs awakening in cascading lines of pale energy. The air pressure in the chamber shifted. Orbiting defense arrays registered a surge. Emergency systems activated across the mountain city. Because the blade was not just lifted. It was online. The human examined the balance. Feels pretty good, he said. He rotated his wrist once, a clean, controlled movement. The blade responded instantly, adjusting microgravitational vectors along its edge. Not resisting. Not testing. Synchronizing. A data officer near the entrance shouted, voice cracking. Energy resonance spike detected. The blade is syncing to his biometric signature. Vila's breathing became shallow. That cannot be, he whispered. It has never answered to mortal biology. The human glanced over. Are you sure? He shifted his grip to one hand fully now, resting the massive weapon against his shoulder with casual ease. The sanctum trembled again, not from destruction. From recalibration. Ancient failsafes, written for a prophecy none had understood, were unlocking in cascading waves. Across the chamber walls, holographic scripture flickered. Lines of sacred text began rewriting themselves. Vila stumbled backward, eyes wide in dawning horror. The blade had not rejected the human. It had recognized him. The gravitational shimmer tightened, conforming precisely to the dimensions of his hand. Like it had been waiting. For him. The human looked down the length of the blade once more, squinting thoughtfully. You guys built a whole religion around this thing. No one answered. Because for the first time in recorded history, the blade of Pharaohs had chosen someone. And it had not chosen a god. The alarms did not ring because the blade moved. They rang because the blade had identified an operator. Across the mountain city, ancient defense towers rotated toward the sanctum. Orbital satellites shifted position in synchronous precision. Deep beneath the cathedral, vault-sealed archives unlocked for the first time in recorded history. The system had one assumption coded into it. If the blade of Pharaohs activated, a god had returned. Inside the sanctum, chaos simmered just beneath the surface. Warriors who had once stood proud now knelt in rigid stillness, unsure whether to attack, worship, or flee. Priests whispered fractured prayers, their voices trembling against the vast stone walls. At the center of it all, the human stood with the blade resting against his shoulder. Calm. Balanced. Not glowing. Not transformed. Just holding it. High Priest Vila forced himself upright. His limbs felt heavier than gravity allowed. His staff lay forgotten at his feet. Seal the chamber, he commanded, though his voice lacked its former authority. Armored sentinels hesitated. Against what? The blade had already chosen. A military commander pushed through the side entrance, flanked by tactical officers. His gaze locked instantly onto the weapon. Confirm, he demanded sharply. A data officer swallowed. Resonance match is stable. The blade has synchronized to his biometric pattern. Genetic scan underway. The commander's jaw tightened. Name. The human glanced over casually. Daniel Reyes. No lineage. No title. Just a name. The commander blinked. Occupation. Daniel adjusted the blade slightly, testing its weight again. Mechanic. The word echoed wrong in the chamber. Vila's breathing grew uneven. That is impossible. The blade recognizes only divine bloodlines. Daniel looked at the weapon in his hand. Feels like it recognizes hands. A murmur rippled through the chamber. The blade hummed faintly again, not aggressively, not violently. Responsive. Attuned. As if calibrating. Suddenly the sanctum's walls flickered. Sacred scripture projected across the crystalline panels began shifting. Ancient glyphs rearranged themselves. Lines of holy text dissolved and rewrote in cascading light. A priest gasped. The codex, it's updating. Vila turned slowly. No, he whispered. That text is immutable. But it wasn't. The inscription above the blade's pedestal, unchanged for millennia, began to fracture. Old translation. Only divinity may command the judgment of stars. New translation emerging beneath it. Authorization locked until return of maker's kin. The chamber went still. The military commander stepped forward sharply. Replay that. The data officer's hands shook over his console. Cross-referencing archived dialects, translation confidence rising 93%, 98. He swallowed hard. It does not say gods. It says makers. Vila staggered back as if struck. No, he breathed again. The makers ascended beyond physical form. Daniel tilted his head slightly. Or maybe they just left. Silence fell like a physical weight. Deep below the sanctum, archive vaults opened fully. Star charts older than the priesthood itself illuminated in holographic bloom. Forgotten wars. Lost sectors. Prehistoric civilizations. And one recurring symbol. The blade's sigil. Found in systems long abandoned. Found in ruins predating Vila's species. Found in places only recently mapped by humans. The commander's expression hardened. Genetic scan complete, the data officer whispered. Everyone turned. Species match confirmed. Human genome displays compatible markers with blade's activation protocol. Vila's crest dimmed to a pale, uncertain hue. Compatible, how? The officer hesitated. There are dormant sequences embedded in the blade's core coding. They align with human mitochondrial patterns. The room shifted. Not physically. Psychologically. The blade had not judged Daniel worthy. It had identified him as belonging. Daniel looked down at the glowing glyphs now faintly tracing along the weapon's length. You're telling me this thing's waiting list was biological? No one answered. Because the implication was far worse than blasphemy. For 3,000 years. They had not been guardians of divinity. They had been caretakers of someone else's property. Vila slowly sank to his knees. We were not chosen, he whispered. Daniel adjusted his grip again, feeling the blade subtly respond to his movement like a perfectly balanced tool. The commander's voice cut through the silence. If humans can operate ancient Maker-class weapons. He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't need to. Across the galaxy, power structures were built on mythology. And mythology had just fractured. Daniel looked around at the kneeling priests, the stunned warriors, the flickering scripture rewriting itself in real time. "So," he said carefully, "what exactly were you guys planning to do if someone lifted it?" No one had an answer. Because no one had ever believed that question would need one. And in that moment, for the first time, the high priest of Pharaohs realized something far more terrifying than a god returning. Gods demanded worship. Humans demanded explanations. The sanctum no longer felt holy. It felt exposed. Ancient archive vaults beneath the mountain city opened completely now, their seals dissolving in response to the blade's activation. Data streams flooded upward into the cathedral's crystalline panels. Star maps rotated in slow holographic arcs above the chamber floor. Daniel still held the blade. It no longer hummed loudly. It simply existed, stable, responsive, waiting. The military commander watched the cascading information scroll past. "Pull the oldest files," he ordered. A historian priest hesitated. "Those records predate unified civilization." "Pull them." The chamber lights dimmed as priority energy rerouted into archive reconstruction. Symbols no one alive had studied in centuries began aligning themselves into readable structure. Vila stared upward, pale. "The first era," he whispered. "Before Ascension Doctrine." A star chart appeared. Not mythological. Not symbolic. Accurate. Hundreds of systems mapped in clean geometric precision. And at the center of that chart, a spiral arm sector marked with a sigil identical to the one glowing faintly on the blade. The translation matrix recalibrated. Ancient text scrolled across the walls. Maker Collective established regional defense grid. Autonomous weapons sealed pending biological key return. Do not engage grid without clearance. The commander's breathing slowed. "This isn't theology," he muttered. "It's military protocol." Vila shook his head weakly. "No, the makers transcended physical form. They became divine energy." The translation continued. Evacuation initiated following civil fracture. Kin sequence distributed to preserve activation lineage. Daniel raised an eyebrow. "Civil fracture?" The historian's voice trembled. Cross-referencing external records. There was a war. Prehistoric. Stellar scale. Images flickered to life, fragmented battle logs reconstructed from corrupted data. Planetary shields failing. Starships unlike any current design, sleek, modular, built for efficiency rather than ornament. And wielded by beings whose silhouettes were unmistakably human. Not identical to Daniel. Older. Variations in phenotype. But undeniably human. The chamber filled with absolute stillness. The commander spoke carefully. "The makers were not gods." The historian swallowed. "They were engineers." The blade pulsed once, faintly, as if acknowledging the correction. Vila's knees struck the stone fully. "No, no, our scripture was misinterpreted," the commander finished. Daniel stared at the star map. "You're telling me my species built this thing?" Data continued unfolding. Blade-class gravitational severance tool. Designed for planetary defense and orbital breach containment. Lockout engaged after internal schism. Await kin authorization. The sanctum felt smaller now. Not a cathedral. A storage vault. The commander turned slowly toward Daniel. "Your species was here long before ours achieved interstellar travel." Vila's voice cracked. "We believed humanity's arrival was recent. Primitive." The historian corrected softly. "Not recent." He zoomed the star chart outward. Several systems once marked with the Maker sigil were now labeled as dead zones. Others were repopulated by younger civilizations. And in the outer rim, human colonies. Recent. Unaware. Daniel let out a slow breath. "So we built a defense network, locked it, then left." The translation flickered again. "Return conditional. Observation period active." The commander stiffened. "Observation?" The historian scanned further. There are references to monitoring nodes. Passive. Hidden. A chilling realization moved through the room. The makers hadn't ascended. They had withdrawn. And they had been watching. Vila lifted his gaze slowly toward Daniel. For 3,000 years, he whispered, we believed this blade was divine judgment. Daniel looked down at it. It's not judgment. He shifted his grip slightly, feeling how easily the weapon responded. It's a tool. The commander's expression hardened with dawning strategic awareness. If humans regain control of Maker-class infrastructure. He didn't finish. He didn't need to. It would destabilize every power block in known space. The sanctum doors opened again as more officials rushed in, intelligence officers, planetary governors, security advisors. The first question was immediate. Is it true? The commander answered without hesitation. The blade is not a relic. He looked directly at Daniel. It's legacy hardware. A tremor passed through the chamber, not physical. Political. The mythology that upheld entire civilizations had just collapsed. Vila bowed his head fully now. We worshipped maintenance protocols. Daniel almost smiled. Yeah, he said quietly. Happens. The blade's glow stabilized completely. No longer flaring. No longer calibrating. It had found what it was waiting for. Not a god. Not a prophet. A compatible operator. And as the reconstructed star map continued expanding across the sanctum ceiling, one final notation appeared in faint script at the edge of known space. Sol sector, Kinorigin world, status, active. The historian's voice was barely audible. That coordinate. The commander looked at Daniel. That's Earth. And for the first time since the blade rose, true fear entered the chamber. Because if the makers were human, then this blade was only one piece of something much larger. The sanctum no longer felt ancient. It felt temporary. Star maps hovered across the ceiling. Archive data pulsed along the crystalline walls. The blade of Pharaohs rested in Daniel Reyes' hand, stable, fully synchronized, awaiting command input that only it would accept. Outside the mountain city, orbital defense platforms remained locked in silent tracking posture. Across the planet, governments were already reacting. Emergency councils convened. Military doctrines recalculated. Political alliances trembled. Inside the sanctum, the military commander stepped forward carefully. Daniel Reyes, he said, voice measured. By all current evidence, your species engineered this defense network. That blade is a Maker-class gravitational severance tool. Daniel shifted his grip slightly, the weapon responding with effortless precision. And? The commander held his gaze. If humans can activate Maker infrastructure across multiple systems, the balance of power changes overnight. That was the polite version. The unspoken version was simpler. Humanity could dominate. High Priest Vila finally rose unsteadily to his feet. His voice was no longer proud. No longer ceremonial. If you are the Maker's kin, then by doctrine, you are divine. Daniel blinked. Please don't do that. A few nervous glances exchanged across the chamber. Vila pressed on, desperate. Our scriptures state that the return of the authorized bearer marks the beginning of the final alignment. Daniel looked around at the kneeling priests, the armed soldiers, the flickering scripture rewriting itself in real time. You built a religion around a locked weapons system. No one argued. The commander spoke again, carefully. There are factions already requesting you be secured. For protection. And for strategic assessment. Detained, Daniel translated calmly. The commander did not deny it. Silence settled. Daniel looked down at the blade, at the faint energy coursing along its length, perfectly balanced, perfectly lethal. A weapon capable of splitting capital ships in orbit. A relic that could shatter planetary shields. A symbol that could topple empires. He could feel it respond to minute changes in his grip, ready to obey. Not demanding worship. Just awaiting instruction. Daniel took a slow breath. Then he walked back toward the shattered pillar. Every eye in the sanctum followed him. Vila's voice trembled. What are you doing? Daniel positioned the blade upright over the fractured foundation. For 3,000 years, Vila whispered, We believed it chose no one. Daniel nodded slightly. It didn't. He drove the blade downward. The impact thundered through the sanctum, not violent, but absolute. The broken black stone reconfigured around the weapon's base, sealing it back into the foundation. Energy flared once. Then stabilized. Dormant. The gravitational shimmer faded to a faint, sleeping pulse. Gasps rippled outward. The commander stepped forward sharply. You are relinquishing control. Daniel released the hilt. I'm declining escalation. The blade remained embedded, but different now. Unlocked. Vila stared. You would surrender divinity. Daniel turned to face him fully. I'm not a god. He gestured toward the blade. That's not a throne. It's a tool. The commander's voice was lower now. You understand what this means? If other maker installations exist. They probably do, Daniel said calmly. And you're just walking away? Daniel looked around the sanctum one last time, at the priests who had mistaken maintenance code for prophecy, at the soldiers who feared what they could not categorize. When you need help, he said evenly, call us. The words settled heavier than any declaration of conquest. Vila's voice was small. What are humans? Daniel paused at the chamber's exit. Not radiant. Not crowned. Just a mechanic with dust on his boots and grease on his sleeve. We're the ones who fix things. He stepped through the doorway. Behind him, the blade of Pharaohs stood embedded once more, no longer a divine mystery. No longer a test. Just dormant hardware awaiting its rightful operators. And across the galaxy, quiet monitoring nodes, ancient maker systems, registered a status update for the first time in thousands of years. Kin confirmed. Authorization active. No hostile command issued. For the first time since the ancient fracture. The network did not prepare for war. It waited. Because the beings who built it had returned. And they had chosen restraint.